Hey guys, welcome to another video. This is the channel Ian the Reader, and I am Ian the Reader. Welcome. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about what I'm calling my second chance TBR. Now, what do I mean by my second chance TBR? Essentially, in this video, I'm going to be talking to you guys about books and series that I thought I had made up my mind on. I had made the decision, I was not changing my mind, I knew how I felt about the books, and now, some period of time later, I'm reconsidering and I'm thinking, you know what? I need to give those books a second chance and see if I feel any differently. Now, there are a couple different circumstances for each of these books. Some of these are series that I mean, you know, we've all been there. There's a series you're super excited about reading. You read the first book, you're like, oh my gosh, this was amazing. I cannot wait to read book 2. And then years go by and book 2 is just sitting on your shelf waiting for you, and you still haven't read it because of reasons. You know, we've all been there. Then there are other books where I read them and I wasn't crazy about them, but now years have gone by and I'm thinking to myself, you know, if I pick that up now as a different reader, a different person with different experiences, I might actually love that book. Or maybe it's a situation where it's a book I read that I already had kind of feelings and hopes and expectations of what the book would be, and then when I read it and it was something different, I was let down. These are the types of situations I'm talking about, where I thought I knew how I felt about a book, but now time has gone by and I want to give it a second chance to see if I actually like it more than I thought I did. So first up, we're going to talk about the book that actually inspired this video, and that book is Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff. This book, I did not like when I read it. I read it back around the time that it came out, and it's actually featured in one of my first ever videos where I did a reading vlog of vampire books around Halloween. And I read it and I did not love it. And there were a couple reasons for that. First of all, the hype around this book was and remains to this day like crazy. This has a very high Goodreads score. A lot of people that read it early said it was absolutely amazing. Robin Hobb wrote a blurb for it and said it was like incredible. So I thought I was gonna really love this book. And then I read it, or I listened to it, I should say, and I did not get what I expected. The main character, while being a guy who's like really tough and cool, has like the dumbest like catchphrase ever, and it got on my nerves so much, and the story jumped around a whole lot. I had a hard time following it. I just thought that it was a little bit ridiculous. Now, like I said, I listened to this book, and I think, to be honest, that really got in the way of my enjoyment. I feel that this is a book, one, that would benefit from being read physically rather than listened to because of the way the story kind of jumps around. And additionally, some of the lines that I thought were just like so dumb being read to me in my ears might not feel that way reading them on the paper and skimming them if I need to. All that to say, this is a book that, especially now that the second book has come out and people say that one is just as good or even better, I really want to give this book a second chance. And a lot of people whose opinion that I really trust have recently read it and said that it's also amazing. And I'm just wondering to myself, did I miss something? Like, why did I not enjoy this as much as everybody else? So this is definitely one I do want to give a second try, and maybe also entering into it with like the expectation of like, I'm not going to enjoy myself. Maybe I'll end up enjoying it a lot more than I think. So this book I will be giving a try again at some point. I don't know when. I wouldn't say it's high on my priority list, but it's definitely front of mind at the moment, so yes. Next is a book that I actually DNF'd after having picked it up on release day, and that book is Fairy Tale by Stephen King. This is the only Stephen King book that I have thus far DNF'd. I picked it up on release day. I was super excited about it because it was like a 600-page fantasy book written by one of my favorite authors, and I was over the moon excited about this. And then I started it and I liked it quite a bit, and then the further in I got, the less I enjoyed it. And then I got to about the halfway point and I was like, I don't care about this book at all. And so I DNF'd it. I just couldn't do it. I could not do it. And so this is one that I want to give a try again with like reduced expectations. I don't think I'm gonna love it. I know that around the midway point, the story is going to shift dramatically and that I might not be as engaged with it as I was in the first half. But that being said, I might still enjoy it. There might be some things about it that I am able to grasp onto and find fulfillment from, and maybe I'll have a better time with it than I thought I was going to in the second half. So I will read that at some point, if for no other reason than I do want to read every Stephen King book. So I have to finish it at some point. But as of right now, it's not one that I plan on getting to anytime soon, really. Maybe that'll change, but there are so many other Stephen King books that I want to read. Once I've gotten to the point where I only have a few Stephen King books left to read, I'll definitely read it, but it's not gonna happen anytime soon. I will give it a second chance though, and thus it is in the video. So next up we have a series that I read the first book in about 4 years ago, and I thought I would continue it at that time, but just didn't get around to it, and that series is The Magicians by Lev Grossman. So this author actually has a new book coming out in July called The Bright Sword, I believe, or The Brightest Sword. I can't remember what exactly it's called, but I'll put the title and picture right here. But this has kind of been piquing my interest, which also makes me want to go back and finish the Magicians trilogy. So like I said, I read this quite a few years ago, and this is definitely a book that I had very different expectations on when I got into it. So it's pitched as like Harry Potter for adults, and I get that, but it just did not have any similar feelings to that. I think when I heard that pitch for it, I was thinking it would have like the found family and like the wonderful magical setting, and it leans more towards like dark academia and like grungy, like not preteens, wow, like young adults, like 19, 20, who are really trying to find themselves and are really moody. So like Order of the Phoenix kind of Harry Potter, I guess, which is my least favorite Harry Potter book, I should say. But yeah, that's kind of the vibe I got from it. And ultimately, I enjoyed myself, but not that I was like desperate to pick up book 2. I thought I would get to it eventually, and now it's been like 5 or 4 years. So I definitely do want to continue this trilogy because I am curious to find out what happens to the characters. But this is one that I will definitely have to reread book 1 if I do plan on continuing. Which, like I said, this author has a new book coming out in July, so maybe I'll read that one. And if I end up enjoying that, then I'll give this trilogy another try. But yeah, I'd like to give it a second chance at some point. Another series that I would like to give a second chance that I totally didn't mean to DNF was this one. This is book 2 of the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang, and I have book 1 around here somewhere. I have no idea where, but this is the book I'm on for this trilogy. I read the Poppy War back in, I want to say, like 2019 or 2020. And while I liked it quite a bit, I was overwhelmed emotionally by the things that happened in that book. And I've heard that book 2 and 3, The Dragon Republic and The Burning God, are even more traumatic than book 1. And so I wanted to give myself some emotional distance from the first book before I continued. And now we are here years and years later, and I have no idea what happened in the first book, other than the trauma. I do remember the trauma, so apparently emotional distance means nothing. But yes, this is another series that I would like to give another try at some point. I do think that I will read it sooner than The Magicians maybe, or the other books I've talked about, if for no other reason that I just bought the whole trilogy, so I kind of feel like I have to. But this is definitely one that I hope to get to in the near-ish future. Probably not by the end of the year, but maybe in 2025. I could feel that happening. The next book is one that I read, and I enjoyed it quite a bit when I read it, but I didn't give it 5 stars, and I have a feeling that if I reread it today, I would give it 5 stars, and that is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. So I did this book wrong. Like, I really did. I read this in December of like 2020-ish, I think. So shortly before having a child. So that's part of my reason for wanting to reread this, because if you don't know anything about The Road, it follows a man and his son traveling through a post-apocalyptic world. It is barren. It is a wasteland. There is like desperation in every single person they meet, and they're scared to meet people because of what people might do to them. It's just a really dire situation. Having read this book before having kids, I think reading after is going to be a little bit of a different experience. Not to say that you can't absolutely love this book not having kids, because you totally can. But I think personally for me, being able to put myself in the situation a little bit more now having become a parent, I think I would be likely to give this book 5 stars. And the reason I said I think I did this book dirty is not because of any of that. It's because I read it in December of a year, and I was trying to meet a reading goal. So I listened to this on audiobook instead of physically reading it, and I listened to it on like 2.5 speed, and I just zoomed through it in like an afternoon. And I think that this book requires you to really digest it and experience this circumstance with these characters, and I did not give them that time. And so while I did give it like a 4 star at the time, I think that if I actually gave this book the time and energy it deserves, it would be a 5 star. So yes, this is one I absolutely need to give a second chance. I probably will read this year. I feel the itch to justify my feelings on this book, and also to give this book the justice it deserves. So I will be reading The Road soon. It feels like a winter book, but I'm not gonna wait till December. Actually, I will say this is actually one of the books that inspired me to stop setting a number goal for myself, because I ruined my experience of it to a certain degree, and it upset me. The next two books are books in beloved fantasy series that I read the first book on, and to be honest, I didn't really enjoy them, and I want to find out if those opinions are valid or if I was just not in the right headspace for them at the time. The first of those is The Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. I read this book back in, I want to say, like 2015, so I was fresh out of high school. I was still reading a whole lot of like YA, and like really snappy books. I wasn't as much of like a heavy reader, or I didn't read a lot of classics or anything like that. Not to say that this is like a heavy book or even like a classic, although I would say it's a classic of the fantasy genre. But it's not that it's not digestible, it's just that it's not the action-packed, fast-paced kind of story that I feel like I was used to at the time. And so when I read this, I was bored, to be honest. But this is a beloved book. I feel like people really praise this series, particularly the first book, and I think that if I reread it today, I would enjoy it more. Now, I don't know necessarily if I would give it 5 stars or if it would be like a new favorite or anything, but I do think that I would at least enjoy my reading experience more now as an adult, as a different kind of reader, as somebody who kind of knows what I'm getting with this book. I think that I could enjoy this more, because on my first read I gave it like a 3-star and I was like, this is boring, and that feels rude. I think this book deserves a little bit more, so I will give this a try at some point in the near future. The next book, however, is a book that I did not like very much at all. I read it maybe like 4 years ago, and I was baffled that I didn't like it. And that book is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Now, I know that I'm not alone in my feelings about this book. I know there are people out there, but I feel like we're like scared to say that we don't like this book, because the people who love this book are like crazy about it. They think it's like one of the best fantasy books of all time. I've read numerous lists that put this as like the best fantasy book of all time, and I don't get it. I don't get it. First of all, I did not like the main character at all, and I feel like that's the most common complaint. I can't even remember. Kvothe. Yeah, how could I forget? Kvothe is just not a character that I like. I thought he was really pompous, kind of whiny, and just like one of those guys who's like the best at everything in the room, and it's so annoying. So yeah, I didn't like that. And then additionally, like the whole pitch for this book is like, oh, I'm Kvothe, I've done this, I've done that, I've blah blah blah, got on all these adventures. And then the first book, you don't even see half of that. I know that this is like a character study. I just didn't like the character that we were studying, and the book itself just failed to wow me. I gave it like a light 3 at the time. I feel like my aggression towards this book has only multiplied in that time. But this is not a video talking about books that I just dislike. I want to give this a try again. I do want to give it a try again with the expectation that I won't like Kvothe, and that it's going to be a slower story, more character-focused story than what I had first anticipated. Because from the blurb of this book, it feels like, yeah, it's going to be focused on this one character, but there's going to be so much adventure going on, and there's just not. This book just was not what I expected, and so I'm hoping that on a reread, I will get it. I will get what everybody else sees in this, because right now all I feel is bad things about this book. Sorry. Another fantasy series that I do want to give another try that I have yet to read more of in like years is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I have kind of like mixed feelings about V.E. Schwab's books, and this is one of the books that really defines that feeling for me. Some of her books I've read I've just been totally underwhelmed by, and others, like Vicious, I've absolutely adored. And so A Darker Shade of Magic is one that received a whole lot of hype around the time the books were coming out, and the 4th book, which is now a continuation of what was originally planned to be a trilogy, came out last year, and I think people like that as well. But I read this, and it sounded so cool. Like, you've got parallel Londons, you've got these people who can like hop between the different dimensions or whatever. It sounded awesome, and I liked the covers. I like the new covers too, but there's just something like timeless about them that I really enjoyed. But all that to say, I read the first book, and I liked certain things about it, and other things about it I just was a little bit underwhelmed by. And so I decided to put the series aside for a time, which has now turned into like 6 years. And that was never the intention. So I do want to pick that series up again. And now that the newest book has come out, and I think she's going to be writing at least one more, maybe it's a whole new trilogy, I don't know. It feels like a good time to get back into the series. So Darker Shade of Magic is definitely one that I will be giving a try, maybe when the next book is announced. I feel like that'll be a good time to do it. Switching lanes a little bit, we have a work of literary fiction / magical realism / sci-fi, maybe, and that's The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. This is a really interesting book, and it's one that I enjoyed what I read, but then I didn't. So let me talk about that a little bit. So what this book is it follows a character named Holly, I believe, but you kind of get her story from a lot of different perspectives. The first story mainly follows her, or the first portion of the story, I should say, mainly follows her as a young girl when she tries to run away from home, and some weird stuff happens when she does so. And then in part 2, we are introduced to another character. It's years later, and we get his perspective, and I believe eventually Holly comes back into the picture. However, I didn't care about his story all that much, and I just had a hard time getting into that second part, to the point that I DNF'd it for what I thought was a temporary time, but now it's been over a year since I read any of this book, and I will probably start over, maybe not actually, because the way the book is divided, you really could just like pick up each individual section, I think. Although it does tell the overall arcing story of Holly, so as long as I remember the first part pretty well, maybe I'll just jump back in. But this is one that I've seen some really great reviews for, and I really did enjoy the writing and the story for the first part of this book. It's just the second part completely lost me. So if I can just push through that, maybe part 3 will grip me more, or maybe I'll end up enjoying part 2 more also. So I'll give it another try, hopefully soon-ish. Also, I really love this cover. And for the last book, we have another fantasy series, one of which I actually read 3 books in, which is, you know, a good amount, especially for how long these books are, but it feels like I barely touched the surface with this series, and that is Malazan, Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. I was a part of a buddy read that was doomed to fail here on BookTube with some great friends of mine, and yeah, we didn't end up continuing the read-along because we were going to try to read like one a month or one every other month, and it's just not a great series for like read-alongs, I think, for like continuing at a consistent pace, because I feel like these books are so dense, so complex, that you really need to just read them when it is right to read them for you. And so, yeah, it wasn't right for me to read any of them at the time that I did. But I tried. I did make it through the first 3 books. I could not tell you a single thing about the plot of any of these for the most part, because I just listened to the audiobooks and I was like, I just got to make this happen because I have a live stream that I want to be a part of and I want to at least have something to add to the conversation. And so I did, but I didn't get a good experience out of my time. I didn't hate any of these books. I just didn't know what was going on. I didn't really connect to the characters, and these are absolutely books that I need to physically read rather than doing the audiobook. But they're also so stinking long that the audiobook was the only way I was going to get through them in a timely manner. So yeah, again, I don't know what I was thinking. I just wanted to read good books with good people, and here we are. That's my whole life story. I want to read good books with good people, but I cannot fulfill my commitments. So maybe I'm a terrible person, but I do want to give this series another try. I will absolutely be starting from the beginning when I do that. And it's one that I truly believe, like, of all of these books, I think I have the highest chance of loving, like absolutely loving this series, but it's going to require a lot of work. It's going to require a lot of time, and I will do it at some point, but when the time is right, at the pace that is right for me, and that's fine. So that's it for this video. Those are the 10 book/series that I would like to give a second chance. Have you read any of these? If so, which of these do you agree with me on, and which of these do you feel like I should give a second chance the soonest? Thank you so much for watching this video, though. I truly do appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!